Before we begin, I'd like to ask you for a small favor. I'm really hoping to break through the magical barrier of 1,000 subscribers. That number holds a special significance for me. Hit that subscribe button. It's just one click, but for me, it's a huge boost of motivation to create my next video. Thank you in advance. The millionaire scoffed when the employee stated she spoke 9 languages, but what happened next shattered him forever. People like you don't learn languages, you learn to scrub floors. The Patek Philippe Nautilus, worth a cool zero, gleamed on Ricardo Salazar's wrist as he let out that booming laugh. A laugh that bounced off the glass walls of the boardroom, cut through the 18 degrees Celsius air conditioning, and pierced Lucia Mendez's chest like a needle. Before we go on, dear, if this story already has your heart in a vice, imagine what's coming. Give this video a like and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss a single chapter. There are so many stories waiting for you here. Lucia's hands were encased in yellow latex gloves, the same ones she used to clean the bathrooms on the 22nd floor, the same ones that now held a silver tray with espresso cups for 5 executives who couldn't even be bothered to look at her. The boardroom reeked of Italian leather and ambition. Ergonomic chairs at $4,000 each, a walnut table that cost more than a car. On the far wall, a 98-inch screen displayed stock market graphs. Green lines climbing, red lines falling. Millions of dollars swarming like ants in a hive. Ricardo Salazar presided over the table from his black leather throne. 53 years old, gray hair slicked back with expensive pomade, an $8,000 custom-tailored suit, a silk red tie. And that smile. The smile of a man who had never lost anything in his life. To his right sat Germán Ochoa, the CFO. Bald, frameless glasses, the face of a man who counted money even in his sleep. To his left, Valeria Montes, the marketing director. 40-something, salon blonde, long wine-colored nails, perfume that cost a fortune a bottle. Across from him, 2 regional managers, interchangeable men in interchangeable suits with interchangeable smiles. And there, standing by the service door, in her navy blue uniform and white apron, was Lucia, 26 years old, brown hair pulled back in a tight ponytail, no makeup, no jewelry, nothing to draw attention. Exactly as you should be, Lucia, right? Ricardo said without looking at her, flipping through a report printed on premium bond paper. Yes, Mr. Salazar. Tell me, Lucia, you who clean these offices every day. He looked up, his gray eyes like dirty ice. What do you think of our expansion into Asian markets? Silence. Germán let out a nervous chuckle. Valeria pretended to check her phone. The 2 managers exchanged glances. Lucia felt the weight of the question as if a stone had been placed on her chest. It wasn't a real question. It was a trap, a game, a reminder. You're the one who scrubs floors. We're the ones who think. I wouldn't know, sir, Lucia replied, lowering her gaze. Of course you wouldn't. Ricardo slammed the report shut. The sound echoed like a gunshot. How are you going to know about international trade if you can barely read? That drew laughter. Germán covered his mouth. Valeria smiled with her lips pressed together. The smile of a woman who had learned to laugh at the cruelties of powerful men to survive the corporate jungle. Lucia tightened her fingers around the tray's handle. Her knuckles turned white beneath the yellow gloves. Breathe, breathe, breathe. You know what? Ricardo leaned back in his chair, crossing his arms. Let me explain something to you, Lucia. There are people born to lead, and there are people born to obey. He pointed to his chest with his index finger. I was born for this. My grandfather founded this empire in 1960. My father multiplied it tenfold. I'm going to take it to Asia, Europe, the whole world. He gestured towards her. You were born to serve coffee, and that's fine. The world needs people like you. The words fell like drops of acid. Lucia didn't look up, didn't say anything, just felt something inside her crack in two. One half wanted to scream, the other half remembered why she was there. Doña Carmen, Grandma Carmen, 81 years old, wrinkled hands, a stooped back, working in the kitchen on the 18th floor because the pension wasn't enough. My daughter, hang in there. It won't be long now. We'll find the proof soon. Are you going to serve me coffee or just stand there like a statue? Ricardo barked. Lucia took a step forward, poured the first cup, a double espresso, no sugar, just how Mr. Salazar liked it. The fine porcelain tinkled against the saucer. Thank you, girl, he said in that tone that turned a normal word into an insult. She poured the other 4 cups. No one thanked her, no one met her eyes. When she finished, She retreated toward the service door, but before she could leave, Ricardo stopped her. "Ah, Lucia, one more thing." She turned. "There's another meeting this afternoon. At 6 p.m., investors from Shanghai are coming, important people." He looked her up and down like inspecting livestock. "I want you to look presentable. None of those ridiculous gloves. Wear the clean uniform, the one without stains. Yes, sir. And smile. Even if you don't understand a word they're saying. Smile. You can do that, can't you?" Valeria coughed. Herman looked out the window. The managers checked their phones. "Yes, sir," Lucia repeated. She left the boardroom, closing the door softly, without a sound, as she had been taught. The hallway was empty. White walls, cold light, a silence that buzzed in her ears. Lucia walked to the service bathroom, entered, and with trembling hands, locked the bolt. She took off the yellow gloves and threw them into the trash can. One landed inside. The other bounced off the rim and dangled. She left it there. She looked at herself in the mirror, 26 years old, brown eyes, light olive skin, features her grandmother, said came from a good family, a face that could be invisible, a face Ricardo Salazar would never remember if he passed her on the street. Good family. What irony. Her family had owned half of Naucalpan. Her grandfather dined with governors. Her father was studying law at UNAM when the deeds disappeared and everything collapsed. Now she cleaned the bathrooms of the sons of thieves. Lucia closed her eyes, took a deep breath. Once, twice, 3 times. She counted to 10. She didn't cry. She had learned not to cry a long time ago, at her father's funeral, during the eviction from the family home, on the nights Doña Carmen cried alone in the kitchen, thinking no one could hear her. She opened her eyes, looked at herself intently. The fluorescent light above flickered. A fly beat against the frosted glass of the window. Outside, in the real world, the city continued to breathe. Cars, horns, street vendors, people working, loving, betraying, dying. And inside, in that white-tiled bathroom that smelled of chemical pine, Lucia Mendez made a decision. No more silence, no more humiliations swallowed with the submissive employee's smile. She leaned towards the mirror, her lips almost touched the glass, and in a low voice, barely a whisper that echoed off the white tiles like an ancient incantation, she said, "Wo hui rang ni hoi hun." I will make you regret it. She said it in perfect Mandarin, with a Beijing accent, the exact tone, one of the 9 languages Ricardo Salazar would never know she spoke. Not yet, but soon, very soon, because that very night, at the meeting with the Shanghai investors, Lucia wouldn't smile. She would speak, and Ricardo Salazar's world would begin to crumble. Lucia Mendez had always been just Lucia Mendez. There was a time, it seemed like another life, another universe, when her full name appeared on notarial documents, property deeds, birth certificates with golden seals. Lucia Gabriela Mendez Solis de Villarreal, daughter of Santiago Mendez Solis, granddaughter of Don Aurelio Mendez Solis, the man who in 1960 owned 340 hectares in the industrial zone of Naucalpan, land that today was worth, by conservative estimates, $3 billion. The same land on which the Salazar Empire stood. Salazar. But that was before the betrayal, before the theft, before the name Mendez Solis was buried under tons of forged documents, judicial bribes, and death threats. Lucia kept that secret like one keeps a knife under the pillow. And every morning, when she put on the navy blue uniform and the white apron, when she tied her hair back in that tight ponytail, when she scrubbed her hands with cheap soap in the service bathroom, she repeated the same promise. I will reclaim what is ours. I will clear my grandfather's name. I will make the Salazars pay. It was 3 p.m. when Lucia went down to the basement of the corporate building, level -2, the boiler room, storage, cleaning supply closets. No one went down there unless absolutely necessary. It smelled of bleach, dampness, and motor oil. Lucia crossed the concrete corridor to the door at the far end. She knocked 3 times. Pause, 2 more times. The door opened. Doña Carmen Mendez waited for her, sitting in a folding chair with her hands in her lap, 81 years old, white hair pulled back in a bun, deep wrinkles like rivers on a map, eyes that had seen too much and forgiven too little. What happened, my daughter? She asked, her voice cracked by decades of cigarettes and prayers. Lucia closed the door and sank into the chair beside her. Today he humiliated me in the meeting, worse than ever. He asked me what I thought of the expansion into Asia, in front of everyone, like it was a joke. Doña Carmen pressed her lips together, extended her hand, and took Lucia's between hers. Grandma hands, hands that had washed other people's clothes for 60 years. You know what you have to do at the 6 p.m. meeting? Not yet. You have to control yourself, my daughter. If you explode now, we lose everything. Doña Carmen squeezed Lucia's hand. We've been looking for the original deeds for 2 years. 2 years cleaning bathrooms, serving coffee, enduring their contempt. And for what? So that one of these days you say something, he gets angry, and they fire us both. Lucia lowered her gaze. Doña Carmen was right. She was always right. The plan was simple but brutal. Infiltrate the Salazar company, access the old archives where, according to the family lawyer, the original copies of the 1960 deeds should be. The deeds that proved Aurelio Mendez Solis was the rightful owner of that land. The deeds that Ricardo Salazar Sr., the current owner's father, had falsified in 1983 with the help of a corrupt judge, a bought notary, and 3 phantom witnesses. Lucia had studied business administration at the Universidad Iberoamericana. She had an MBA from the Sorbonne. She spoke Spanish, English, French, German, Mandarin, Japanese, Russian, Portuguese, and Arabic. But none of that mattered if she didn't recover those deeds. So she became invisible. She became the employee. She became Lucia, without a last name, and she waited. How much longer? She asked in a low voice. Doña Carmen pulled a yellowed envelope from her apron and opened it. Inside was a paper folded in 4. Don Esteban sent me this yesterday. Lucia unfolded the paper. It was a blurry photocopy of an archival index. Notarial Archive Naucalpan, State of Mexico, 1960 to 1115. Section, Purchase Deeds. Box 47, File 892. Mendez Solis, Aurelio, Industrial Land. Lucia's heart leaped. This is it. Don Esteban says, the original copy should be in the building's dead file room, floor -3, behind the old filing cabinets. Doña Carmen refolded the paper and put it away. But we need the key to the archive, and the only person who has it is Valeria Montes. Exactly. Valeria Montes, the marketing director, the woman with the expensive perfume and the wine-colored nails. The same one who had laughed when Ricardo humiliated Lucia that morning. The same one who kept the master keys to the building on her desk. Lucia leaned against the concrete wall, closed her eyes. Almost there. We're almost there, my daughter. She opened her eyes. Doña Carmen. She looked at me with that expression, that blend of pride and fear only grandmothers can master. Promise me you won't do anything foolish. I won't do anything foolish. Promise me. Truly. I promise, abuela. Doña Carmen nodded, then pushed herself up with difficulty, her knees creaking like old wood. All right then, it's 3:30 already. That meeting starts at 6. Go get changed. Put on your clean uniform. Lucia stood, embracing her grandmother. A long, tight hug, the kind that either signifies farewell or steels you for battle. As they parted, Doña Carmen placed a hand on her cheek. Your grandfather would have been so proud of you. I haven't done anything yet. You've already done so much, mija. You endured. That's a lot. At 5:30 in the afternoon, Lucia was in the bathroom, on the 22nd floor, putting on the clean uniform, the same navy blue, the same white apron, but impeccable. She tied back her hair, washed her face. Smile. Even if you don't understand anything, just smile. She clenched her teeth. At that moment, her cell phone vibrated. A message from Valeria Montez's internal system. Subject, last-minute change. Lucia, the 6 p.m. meeting has been canceled. The Chinese investors didn't arrive. Mr. Salazar is furious. Do not come to the 22nd floor. I repeat, do not come. Inform your grandmother not to come up either. Lucia read the message twice, then a third time. Something didn't add up. Why was Valeria being so insistent? Valeria had never shown any consideration. Unless... Her stomach twisted. She ran out. Down the service stairs. 21st floor. 20th floor. 19th floor. 18th floor. She pushed open the door to the empty kitchen. Abuela, she yelled. Nothing. She went down to the basement. 22nd floor. She knocked on the door of the boiler room. No answer. She opened it. Doña Carmen wasn't there, but on the folding chair sat a white envelope. Lucia opened it with trembling hands. Inside was a handwritten note, elegant script, blue ink. Dearest Lucia, I know who you are, I know what you seek, and I know you are on the verge of finding it. But if you take one more step, your grandmother will pay the price. She is safe for now. If you want to see her again, come to my office alone before 7 p.m. Tell no one, call no police, or Doña Carmen will end up like your grandfather. Fondly, R. Lucia crumpled the note in her fist. She squeezed it until her knuckles turned white. She closed her eyes, took a breath, and when she opened them, she was no longer the submissive employee who served coffee in silence. She was Lucia Gabriela Mendez Solis de Villarreal, and no one threatened her grandmother. You want war, Ricardo? Her voice was firm, cold as tempered steel. Then you'll have war. She left the room, climbed the stairs, crossed the deserted lobby, and headed for the 23rd floor, L's office. The 23rd floor was forbidden territory. Only owners, partners, investors with Forbes-worthy surnames ever reached it. That's where multi-million-dollar mergers, hostile takeovers, and mass layoffs that erased entire families from the map with a single email were decided. Lucia had never been to the 23rd floor until now. The private elevator required a special access card. Lucia didn't have one, so she took the emergency stairs. She climbed all 23 floors without stopping. Her legs burned, her heart pounded against her ribs like a hammer. It didn't matter. Doña Carmen was in danger, and that was all that mattered. She reached the gray metal door of the 23rd floor, pushed it. It was closed, of course. She knocked 3 times with her fist. Hard. Silence. She knocked again. Harder. The sound echoed in the stairwell like a church bell. The door opened. On the other side stood Sherman Ochoa, the chief financial officer. Bald. Frameless glasses. A look of utter surprise. Lucia, what are you doing here? I need to see Mr. Salazar now. Herman blinked like a confused owl. You can't be here. If the boss sees you, you're in trouble. He's already seen me, and he knows who I am. Lucia took a step forward. So either you let me pass, or I'll scream so loud the whole building will know what Ricardo Salazar did to my family. Herman opened his mouth, closed it, opened it again. Lucia pushed past him, gently but firmly. She entered. The 23rd floor didn't resemble any other floor in the building. Cream-colored carpet that swallowed footsteps, dark wood-paneled walls, designer lamps that looked like sculptures, enormous windows with a view of all of Mexico City, the Angel of Independence gleaming in the distance, the orange sky of sunset, millions of lights beginning to flicker on like fireflies. And at the end of the hall, behind double mahogany doors with silver handles, was Ricardo Salazar's office. Lucia walked towards it. Herman trotted behind her like a nervous dog. Lucia, please, this is not a good idea. If I go in there without permission, I no longer need permission. She reached the double doors, grasped the handles, and pushed. Ricardo Salazar's office was the size of an apartment. A solid walnut desk, an Italian leather executive chair, shelves filled with books no one read. On the wall, framed diplomas, Harvard, London School of Economics. And in the center, standing by the window, was Ricardo Salazar. He wasn't alone. Seated on the black leather sofa, hands folded in her lap, was Doña Carmen. Abuela. Doña Carmen looked up. Her eyes were red but dry. I'm fine, my child, she said, her voice firm. Did he hurt you? He hasn't touched me. She looked at Ricardo with contempt. Cowards don't touch. They only threaten. Ricardo let out a laugh. Oh, Doña Carmen, what a tongue you have. Lucia took a step towards him. Herman closed the doors behind her. Let her go now, or what? Ricardo crossed his arms. Are you going to call the police? Are you going to scream? Are you going to make a scene? He laughed. Please, do. The sooner you get this over with, the better. Lucia took a deep breath. She counted to 3. How did you know? Know what? Who I am? About the deeds? Everything? Ricardo walked to his desk. He poured himself a whiskey, offered none. Lucia Gabriela Mendez Solis de Villarreal. He enunciated each word as if chewing glass. Did you really think you could infiltrate without me noticing? I have people who investigate even the window cleaners. Why did you let me continue? Because I wanted to see how far you'd go, and because I enjoyed watching you clean my bathrooms knowing who you were. The granddaughter of the great Aurelio Mendez Solis. A pause. The man my father took everything from. Silence. Doña Carmen closed her eyes. Lucia clenched her fists. He didn't take it, he stole it. Call it what you will. In the end, those lands are legally mine. I have deeds, documents, judges who sign what I say. He smiled. What do you have? Old papers. The testimony of an old woman. Lucia took another step. I have the truth. Truth is worthless without power, and I have the power. Oh, really? Then why did you bring me here? If you had all the power, you would have ignored me. She smiled humorlessly. But you didn't bring me here. You kidnapped my grandmother. You know what that tells me? Ricardo narrowed his eyes. What? That you're afraid. Ricardo placed the glass on the desk slowly, but his hands trembled. I'm not afraid of anyone. A lie. You're afraid of the Chinese investors. That's why you canceled the meeting. Because if I spoke in front of them, your expansion into Asia would collapse. She took another step. You're afraid someone will find the deeds. That's why you brought me here. And above all, you're afraid they'll discover you're a fraud, that your name is built on lies and blood. Ricardo walked towards her, stopping inches away. Lucia didn't back down. Listen carefully, little employee. He spat the word. You are nobody. Your family is nobody. And if you keep looking for trouble, I will destroy you. You, your grandmother, anyone who bears the name Mendez Solis. He smiled maliciously. Understood? Lucia looked him straight in the eye. 3 seconds. 5 seconds. 10 seconds. And then she spoke, but not in Spanish. Ni hao. Her voice was calm, perfect, without an accent. Ricardo blinked. What? Lucia switched languages. Beast. Perfect German. Russo como parler. Fluent French. Shut up, because you're a coward. English. Ricardo recoiled as if struck. German, still by the door, dropped his folder. Papers scattered across the floor. Doña Carmen smiled. A small smile, barely visible, but it was there. Lucia took a step towards Ricardo. Now he was the one backing away. Lan árabe porque vos es un cobarde. Portuguese. Anata yara. Ricardo stumbled back against his desk. The whiskey glass fell. Do you remember what you said this morning? Lucia spoke in Spanish, but her voice had changed. People like you don't learn languages. They learn to clean floors. She moved closer. Well, look at me carefully, Ricardo. People like me speak 9 languages. I have an MBA from the Sorbonne, and I've already found the deeds. The color drained from his face. A lie. Want to bet? Your father kept copies. Box 47, file 892. She took out her cell phone. 3 hours ago, Don Esteban Villarreal retrieved them with a judge as a witness, legally, documented. Ricardo's mouth opened. No sound came out. Tomorrow, those deeds will be at the public prosecutor's office, and by noon, all the news channels will know that the Salazar empire is built on theft. She put away her cell phone. So no, you won't destroy me. I've already destroyed you. The silence was absolute. Outside, the city glittered. Inside, Ricardo's world was crumbling. Lucia walked towards the sofa, extended her hand to Doña Carmen. Let's go, abuela. They walked towards the door. Herman stepped aside. As Lucia placed her hand on the handle, Ricardo spoke. This isn't over. Lucia turned. You're right. It's going to get much worse. She left with Doña Carmen. The door closed softly, but definitively, like the lid of a coffin. In the hallway, Doña Carmen hugged her. Oh, my child. Almost there, abuela. We're almost done. It's true. Don Esteban has the deeds. Yes. And tomorrow, all of Mexico will know the truth. They walked towards the elevator. The doors opened, but before entering, Lucia looked back. Behind the glass, she saw a silhouette, a tall man in a gray suit, someone who had been watching from the shadows, someone who was now smiling. The doors closed. Lucia knew this was just the beginning. Lucia didn't sleep that night. She stayed awake in the small 2-bedroom apartment she shared with Doña Carmen in Colonia Guerrero. Sitting by the window, watching the cars go by, the lights of the taco stands on the corner, the stray dogs searching for food in the trash. Her cell phone vibrated 17 times between 11 p.m. and 4 a.m., 17 calls from the same number. Ricardo Salazar didn't answer any of them. At 5 a.m., as the sky began to turn gray, Doña Carmen came out of her room. She wore her worn blue robe, her hair loose, her feet bare. She sat beside Lucia without a word. They stayed like that in silence, watching the dawn break over a city that didn't know what was about to happen. Are you afraid? Doña Carmen finally asked. Lucia didn't answer immediately. She considered her response. She waited. Yes, I am too. Do you think Don Esteban will be all right? That man has survived 40 years defending lost causes. Doña Carmen let out a tired laugh. If anyone can take care of himself, it's him. Lucia's cell phone vibrated again. This time it wasn't Ricardo. It was a message from an unknown number. Lucia, it's Esteban. Don't go to the prosecutor's office today. I repeat, don't go. Call me when you read this. Urgent. Her stomach tied into a knot. She dialed the number. It rang once, twice. On the third ring, someone answered. Don Esteban. Lucia, thank God. The lawyer's voice sounded hoarse, tired, scared. Where are you? At my house. What happened? It's fine, I'm fine, but the deeds, silence. Lucia, someone broke into my office last night. The world stopped. What? They forced the archive door, broke into the safe, and took the original deeds. Don Esteban coughed. And they took the certified copies too, all of them. Lucia closed her eyes, her knuckles turning white as she squeezed the cell phone. How? I don't know. I have security cameras, but they disabled them. They cut the building's electricity, went in, took what they needed, and left. Professionals. Another pause. Lucia, this was the work of people with resources, a lot of money, a lot of connections. He didn't need to say the name. Ricardo Salazar called the police. Yes. They came, took notes, said they were going to investigate. Don Esteban let out a bitter laugh. But you and I both know they won't find anything. No, if Salazar already paid them to look the other way. Lucia stood up, pacing the room. Doña Carmen watched her with worried eyes. And now what do we do? I don't know, my child. Without the deeds, we have no case. It's your word against his, and he has judges, notaries, bought witnesses. Silence. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. Don't apologize. You did everything you could. It wasn't enough. We're not done yet. Lucia, thank you for letting me know. Don Esteban. Take care. She hung up. She threw the cell phone onto the sofa. Doña Carmen slowly got up. What are we going to do? Lucia didn't answer. She had no answer. She had fought for 2 years, swallowed humiliation, cleaned toilets, smiled when she wanted to scream, and when she finally had the proof in hand, when she could finally prove the truth, Ricardo Salazar had snatched it away from her again, just as his father had snatched everything from her grandfather. The phone rang. Lucia ignored it. It rang again. She kept ignoring it. On the third ring, Doña Carmen picked it up. Hello? Yes, she's here. Who's speaking? Her eyes widened. She handed the phone to Lucia. He says he's the man in the gray suit. Lucia took the cell phone. Who are you? A deep, calm voice, with a barely perceptible foreign accent. My name is Shou Wei. I am the legal representative of Chen Industries, the Chinese company that was going to invest $500 million in the expansion of Salazar Corp. Pause, or rather, going to invest. Lucia straightened up. Why are you calling me? Because yesterday I was on the 23rd floor and I heard everything. Her heart skipped a beat. Everything. Everything. Sal let out a sigh. Miss Mendez Solis, my company does not invest in companies built on theft and fraud. We have very strict ethical standards. And what I heard yesterday, pause. Let's just say Mr. Salazar just lost $500 million. Lucia sat down slowly. I already told him. This morning at 6 a.m., I called his cell phone personally. I informed him that Chen Industries was withdrawing from the agreement immediately, without negotiation. And what did he say? He offered me double, then triple, then he threatened me. Chow let out a dry laugh. None of the three worked. Lucia closed her eyes. She took a deep breath. Why are you telling me this? Because I have something you need. What? Ahem. Yesterday, when I was in Mr. Salazar's office, I recorded the entire conversation on my cell phone. His confession, his threats, everything. Pause. And this morning, after he threatened me, I decided that recording should be in the right hands. Lucia's eyes flew open. Are you telling me I have audio proof that Ricardo Salazar admits his father stole your grandfather's land? That he knows it? That he has bought judges? That he threatened to destroy your family? Sal paused. Are you interested? Why are you doing this? Because my father also lost everything because of men like Ricardo Salazar. Men who think money gives them the right to trample on anyone. His voice hardened. And because I hate cowards. Lucia felt something ignite within her chest. A small but living spark. Where do we meet? Café Azul, Colonia Roma. In an hour. Come alone. How will I recognize you? I will recognize you. Sa hung up. Lucia lowered the phone, looked at Doña Carmen. We have a chance. Who is that man? I don't know. But if he's telling the truth, We can win. Doña Carmen nodded slowly. Be careful, my child. Always. Café Azul was on a quiet corner of Colonia Roma. Wooden tables, matching chairs, the smell of freshly brewed coffee and sweet bread. At 9 in the morning, it was almost empty. Lucia entered. She wore jeans, a white blouse, her hair down. No uniform, no apron. Today she wasn't the employee. Today she was herself. A man raised his hand from a table in the back. Gray suit, white shirt, no tie, late 40s, Asian features, military bearing. Sawe. Lucia walked towards him, sat down. Thank you for coming, he said. Thank you for calling. Shawe took out his cell phone, placed it on the table, touched the screen, and an audio began to play. Ricardo Salazar's voice filled the cafe. My father took everything from him. I have judges who sign whatever I tell them. I'm going to destroy you, your grandmother. Lucia listened to the whole thing. 3 minutes, 40 seconds. Every word, every threat, every confession. When it ended, Sawe turned off the audio. It's yours. Do with it what you deem necessary. And what do you gain? Nothing, Sala smiled. Except knowing that a cruel man will pay for what he did. Lucia extended her hand. Thank you, ciao. Wheela shook it. Don't give them to me yet. Winning this battle will require more than a recording. Salazar has power, he has money, he has influence. He looked at her intently. Are you ready for what's coming? Lucia didn't hesitate. Ready. Sa nodded. He stood up. He left a card on the table. If you need help, call me. Chen Industries has very good lawyers. He left. Lucia remained alone with the cell phone on the table. She picked it up, saved the audio to the cloud, made 3 copies, sent them to 3 different emails, and then dialed a number. Prosecutor Garcia, this is Lucia Mendez Solis. I have evidence of real estate fraud and judicial bribery. Do you have time to listen to me? Doña Carmen's house smelled of cinnamon and memories. A small apartment in Colonia Guerrero. 2 rooms. A kitchen the size of a closet. A bathroom with cracked tiles. The walls were full of photographs. Lucia as a child, her father Santiago in his robes, her grandfather Aurelio next to a building that no longer existed. 3 days had passed since the call to Prosecutor Garcia. Now, on Friday afternoon, Lucia was sitting on the floor, surrounded by old boxes that Doña Carmen had kept in the closet for 40 years. Are you sure you want to see this, my child? Lucia nodded. I need to know exactly what they did to us. Doña Carmen took out a yellowish cardboard box tied with twine, placed it on the table. This is all that's left. Lucia untied the twine. Inside were sepia photographs, handwritten letters, receipts, notarial documents, and at the bottom, wrapped in tissue paper, a silver pocket watch. Lucia picked up the watch. It was stopped. The hands pointed to 317. It was your grandfather's. It stopped the day he died. Lucia closed her eyes, pressed the watch against her chest. Tell me everything. Doña Carmen sat down, took a deep breath. Your grandfather Aurelio was a good man, too good. In 1960, he bought those lands in Naucalpan, 340 hectares. He paid for them with 20 years of work as an engineer. Every peso was clean sweat. Lucia took out a photograph. Her grandfather, young and smiling, in front of a sign, property of Aurelio Mendez Solis. He wanted to build decent homes for working families. Nothing luxurious, just decent. He said everyone deserved a roof over their heads. Doña Carmen smiled sadly. In 1975, Ricardo Salazar, the father, arrived. He saw those lands and knew they were worth millions. He offered him a pittance. Your grandfather said no. Lucia picked up a letter. Salazar and Associates. 200,000 pesos for the entirety of your lands. If you do not accept, I will take legal action. 200,000 when they were worth 5 million. Doña Carmen pursed her lips. Your grandfather laughed and told him to go to hell, and that's where it all began. She took another letter from the box. This one had no letterhead, just trembling handwritten script. Your grandfather wrote this 3 weeks before he died. He never sent it, but he kept it. I think he knew what was coming. Lucia unfolded the paper. It was yellowed, fragile, like onion skin, and she began to read. Mexico City, September 8, 1983. To whom it may concern, my name is Aurelio Mendez Solis. I am 64 years old, a civil engineer by profession, and a family man by vocation. I am writing this letter because I am afraid. Not afraid for myself. At my age, death no longer scares me. I am afraid for my son Santiago. afraid for my wife Carmen, afraid for the grandchildren I may never know. 8 years ago, a man named Ricardo Salazar tried to buy the lands that took me 20 years of honest work. I said no. Since then, my life has become hell. First came the threats, late-night calls, anonymous letters, men following me down the street. Then came the accidents, a fire in my office, a robbery in my home, my wife attacked by thieves who took nothing. But the worst came later. 3 months ago, Judge Ramirez Ochoa, a man I considered my friend, summoned me to his office. He showed me documents that stated my deeds were false, that the lands were never mine, that it was all a fraud, lies, damn lies. But the judge had witnesses, he had proof, he had everything Ricardo Salazar's money could buy. He gave me 2 options: sign the lands over to Salazar for a ridiculous amount, or go to jail for fraud. I signed. God forgive me, but I signed, because I was afraid, because my wife was sick, because my son was 18 years old and had a whole life ahead of him. I signed. Ahem. And from that day on, a part of me died. I don't know how much time I have left. The doctor says my heart is weak, that I should avoid stress. But how do you avoid stress when your entire life has been stolen? If anyone reads this someday, I want them to know the truth. I did not sell those lands. They were taken from me. Ricardo Salazar is not a successful businessman. He is a thief in an expensive suit. And if there is justice in this world, although I doubt it more each day, someday someone will make him pay. I am not asking for revenge, only for the truth, that my name be cleared, that my grandchildren know that their grandfather was not a fraud, that he was an honest man who worked hard his entire life and lost everything because he believed justice existed. I forgive Ricardo Salazar because forgiveness is all I have left. But may God not forgive him. With love and hope for the future. Aurelio Mendez Solis. Lucia finished reading. Her hands trembled, the paper was damp. She realized she was crying. Doña Carmen was also crying, but silently, without sobs, just tears falling on her wrinkled hands. He died 2 weeks after writing this, the old woman said. A heart attack? On the street. In front of the land that was no longer his, he closed his eyes. They found him with the pocket watch in his hand, stopped at 3:17 in the afternoon. Lucia hugged the letter to her chest, squeezed it as if it were her grandfather himself. I'm so sorry, Grandma. I'm so sorry. You have nothing to be sorry for, my child. You are doing what he could no longer do. Doña Carmen placed a hand on her cheek. You are clearing his name. You are telling the truth. You are fighting the fight he lost. But he asked for forgiveness. He said he forgave Ricardo Salazar. And he did because he was a saint. Doña Carmen smiled sadly. But you don't have to forgive anything. You have to seek justice. And justice is not the same as revenge. Lucia wiped her tears with the back of her hand. I'm going to use this letter. I'm going to read it at the trial. I'm going to make all of Mexico hear it. I know, and I will win. I know. They hugged. Grandmother and granddaughter. Past and present. Pain and hope. Outside, the sun, was setting over Mexico City, the city that had seen empires born and dynasties fall, the city that held secrets on every corner. Somewhere in that city, Ricardo Salazar had just received a call informing him that Lucia Mendez Solis had formally presented her grandfather's letter as evidence in the case, a letter that would destroy him from beyond the grave. Ricardo was in his office when the news arrived. Sherman Ochoa entered without knocking. His face was ashen. Mr. Salazar, we have a problem. What problem? Ricardo didn't look up from his computer. The old Mendez's granddaughter presented a handwritten letter from 1983. Sherman swallowed. Her grandfather tells everything. The threats, the bribery of Judge Ramirez, everything. Ricardo froze. The mouse slipped from his hand. What? And there's more. The prosecution is summoning Judge Ramirez to testify, and he's alive. He's 86, but he's alive. And they say he's willing to talk. Silence filled the office like poisoned water. Ricardo slowly stood up, walked to the window, and looked out at the city he had conquered. For the first time in his life, he felt real fear. Call the lawyers. All of them. I already did. Herman cleared his throat. They say this is no longer a legal problem, but a public image problem. And public image can't be bought. Ricardo closed his eyes. In his mind, he heard his father's voice the day before he died. Drunk, embittered. My son, if anyone ever finds what I've done, run. Because there's no money in the world that will save you from the truth. He opened his eyes. It was already too late to run. The message arrived at 11 p.m. on Tuesday. Lucia was lying in bed, reviewing documents for Thursday's hearing, when her cell phone vibrated. Unknown number. I have information about Judge Ramirez, something the prosecution doesn't know. Meet me tomorrow, 8 p.m., Warehouse 47, Naucalpan. Come alone, a friend. Lucia read the message 3 times, then reread it 3 more. Something smelled fishy. Warehouse 47. The same number from the deeds file. It wasn't a coincidence. Come alone. The words that always preceded a trap. A friend. No one who was truly a friend would identify themselves like that. Lucia sat on the bed, looked at her phone, and thought, Ricardo Salazar was desperate. Her grandfather's letter had been published in 3 newspapers. The prosecution had opened a formal investigation. Judge Ramirez had agreed to testify. The walls were closing in, and a desperate man was dangerous. Lucia dialed a number. Fiscal Garcia, Lucia, it's late. Did something happen? I just received a suspicious message. I think it's a trap. She read the entire message. Silence from the other end. Then the prosecutor's voice, serious, professional. Don't go. I have to go. What? No, absolutely not. It's obvious Salazar wants. I know. He wants to set a trap for me. He wants me to go alone, without witnesses, so he can threaten me, hurt me, or worse. Lucia stood up. But if I don't go, we'll never be able to prove he's obstructing justice. We need proof he's trying to manipulate the case. Lucia, I'm gonna go, but not alone. She smiled, even though the prosecutor couldn't see her. I'm bringing backup. Wednesday, 7:45 p.m. Warehouse 47 was in an industrial zone of Naucalpan. Dark streets, abandoned buildings, dogs barking in the distance. The kind of place where no one hears screams. Lucia arrived by taxi. She asked the driver to wait on the corner. If I'm not out in 30 minutes, call the police. She gave him a 500 peso bill. Please. The driver, an older man with a gray mustache, nodded. Be careful, miss. Lucia walked toward the warehouse. The streetlights flickered. Her footsteps echoed on the cracked asphalt. The warehouse door was ajar. She pushed it open. Inside, it smelled of rusted metal and dampness. Empty shelves, rotten cardboard boxes, a lamp hanging from the ceiling swaying in the wind, and in the back, standing by a folding table, was Ricardo Salazar. He wasn't alone. Beside him were 2 men, large, in cheap suits, with hands like hammers, or private security, or something worse. Lucia, Ricardo smiled. How punctual. Lucia stayed by the door. She didn't step further inside. Where's the information about Judge Ramirez? There is no information. Ricardo shrugged. That was just to get you here. What do you want me for? To make you an offer. A final offer. Ricardo walked toward her slowly. Withdraw the lawsuit. Withdraw your grandfather's letter. Tell the prosecution it was all a misunderstanding, and I'll... He smiled. Give you 5 million pesos. Cash, tonight. Lucia burst out laughing. 5 million? The land is worth 2 billion. The land is legally mine, but I'll give you 5 million as compensation for the trouble. Ricardo stopped 2 meters away from her. That's generous, considering you have no legal right. I have the truth. The truth doesn't pay rent. Ricardo gestured around. Look where you live. Look how you live. Your grandmother is 81 and still works cleaning kitchens. He lowered his voice. 5 million pesos. You can leave, live comfortably, forget all this. Lucia looked him directly in the eyes. No, no, no. She took a step towards him. I won't sell my grandfather's dignity for 5 million. Not for 50, not for 500. Another step. Because there are things that aren't for sale, Ricardo. And one of those things is the truth. Ricardo's face hardened. You're a fool and you're a thief. Lucia smiled. But at least I can sleep at night. Ricardo gestured. The 2 men moved closer. Last chance, Lucia. Take the money, or things will get complicated. Are you threatening me? I'm being realistic. Accidents happen. People disappear. Especially people who get into trouble they can't handle. Ricardo tilted his head. It would be a shame if something happened to your grandmother. At her age, a push down the stairs, Lucia felt rage ignite like fire in her chest. But she didn't explode, didn't scream, didn't move. She just spoke calmly, with ice in her voice. You know what the saddest part of all this is, Ricardo? What? That you truly believe you're going to win, that money and threats will save you. She smiled. But you've already lost. Oh yeah? How? Lucia pulled her phone out of her pocket. Because this conversation is being recorded and broadcast live. She raised the phone so Ricardo could see the screen. Fiscal Garcia is listening to everything, and so are 2 patrol cars outside waiting for my signal. The color drained from Ricardo's face. Lies, want to bet? Lucia touched the screen. Fiscal, can you hear me? Prosecutor Garcia's voice came from the speaker. I hear you perfectly, Lucia, and I've recorded everything, including the threat against Doña Carmen. The 2 security guards backed away. Ricardo stood frozen like a salt statue. This doesn't count. It's not admissible in court. You're right. A recording without consent isn't admissible. Lucia put her phone away. But it's enough for the prosecution to request your pretrial detention for obstruction of justice and threats, and for all the media to know that Ricardo Salazar summoned a witness to an abandoned warehouse to threaten her. Ricardo opened his mouth, then closed it. Lucia walked to the door, stopped, and turned. My grandfather forgave you, but I didn't. So get ready, Ricardo, because this is just the beginning. She left the warehouse. Outside, 2 patrol cars waited with their lights on. Prosecutor Garcia got out of one of them. Are you okay? I'm perfect, Lucia smiled. You have everything? Every word. The prosecutor looked toward the warehouse. I'm going to request an arrest warrant tonight, and the 2 accomplice men will fall too. Lucia nodded. She took a deep breath. The night air tasted like victory. The taxi was still waiting on the corner. The driver waved at her. Lucia got in. Where to, miss? Home. She closed her eyes. Home. The next morning, the headlines read, Embattled businessman Ricardo Salazar arrested for threats and obstruction of justice. Heiress Mendez Solis denounces historic theft of millionaire lands. Retired judge admits to bribery in 1983 case. Lucia read the news on her phone while having breakfast with Doña Carmen. Did you do it, my darling daughter? The old woman said, tears in her eyes. Not yet. The trial is still to come. Lucia took her grandmother's hand. But almost. We're almost there. Your grandfather would be proud. I know. Outside, the city was waking up. Millions of people going to work, to study, to live their lives. And somewhere in that city, in a cold cell, Ricardo Salazar stared at the ceiling and understood for the first time in his life what it felt like to lose. The 8th Civil Court of Mexico City was packed. It wasn't normal for a preliminary hearing to attract so many people. But this wasn't a normal case. Mendez Solis versus Salazar Corp. Real estate fraud, judicial bribery, land dispossession. Reporters occupied the first 3 rows. Cameras, microphones, notebooks. All waiting for the moment they could run out and publish the story. Behind them, ordinary citizens. People who had read the headlines. People who wanted to see with their own eyes how an empire fell. And at the front, behind an old wooden table, sat Lucia Mendez Solis. She wore a black pantsuit, nothing flashy, nothing ostentatious, just dignified. Her hair was pulled back in a low bun, no excessive makeup, no jewelry. She didn't need any of it. Truth needs no adornment. Beside her, Don Esteban Villarreal, the 84-year-old lawyer who had waited 40 years for this moment, in an impeccable gray suit, navy blue tie, hands trembling slightly, but eyes burning with pure fire. On the other side of the room, behind another table, sat Ricardo Salazar. He no longer wore a $1,000 suit. Now he wore a standard suit provided by his defense attorney, gray, nondescript, the uniform of the fallen. He had dark circles under his eyes, a 2-day stubble, his hands cuffed in front of him, and beside him, 3 defense lawyers, expensive, aggressive, desperate. Judge Marta Quintana entered the room, 62 years old, short gray hair, reading glasses hanging from a chain, a black robe that dragged as she walked. All rise, ordered the clerk. Everyone stood. The judge sat. She struck the gavel once. You may be seated. She looked toward both tables. We are here for the preliminary hearing in the case of Mendez Solis versus Salazar Corporation. She reviewed her papers. The plaintiff requested to present a document as primary evidence. Is that correct? Don Esteban stood. That is correct, Your Honor. A handwritten letter from Mr. Aurelio Mendez Solis, dated September 8, 1983, 2 weeks before his death. The defense has objections. One of Ricardo's lawyers stood up. Young, in his late 30s. Expensive suit. Shark-like smile. Yes, Your Honor. We object to the authenticity of the document. There is no way to verify that this letter was actually written by Mr. Mendez Solis. It could be a forgery. We have the graphology analysis, Don Esteban replied calmly, and 3 witnesses who recognize Mr. Mendez Solis's handwriting. Even so, Your Honor, a letter written under emotional stress cannot be considered reliable testimony. It is clearly sufficient. The judge raised her hand. I will allow the presentation of the letter. I will decide later if it is admissible as evidence. She looked at Don Esteban. Proceed. Don Esteban nodded. He took the letter from his briefcase, held it with both hands, as if holding something sacred. With your permission, Your Honor, I would like to read the full letter aloud. Proceed. Don Esteban cleared his throat. His hands trembled more now, but his voice came out firm, clear, and he began to read. Mexico City, September 8, 1983. To whom it may concern. My name is Aurelio Mendez Solis. I am 64 years old, a civil engineer by profession, and a family man by vocation. I am writing this letter because I am afraid. Not afraid for myself. At my age, death no longer scares me. Afraid for my son Santiago. Afraid for my wife Carmen. Afraid for the grandchildren I may never meet. Tonquate. The room was in absolute silence. Reporters scribbled, heads down. Cameras rolled. People held their breath. Lucia closed her eyes. She heard her grandfather's voice through Don Esteban's words. 8 years ago, a man named Ricardo Salazar tried to buy the land that took me 20 years of honest work to acquire. I told him no. Since then, my life has become hell. Ricardo Salazar stared at the table, not meeting anyone's gaze. His lawyers frantically took notes. First came the threats, late-night calls, anonymous letters, men following me down the street. Then came the accidents. A fire in my office, a robbery at my home, my wife attacked by thieves who took nothing. One of the reporters wiped his eyes with the back of his hand. 3 months ago, Judge Ramirez Ochoa summoned me to his office. He showed me documents claiming my deeds were forged. Lies, damned lies. But the judge had witnesses, he had evidence, he had everything Ricardo Salazar's money could buy. He gave me 2 options: sign the land over to Salazar, or go to jail for fraud. I signed. God forgive me, but I signed. Don Esteban's voice cracked slightly. He paused, took a deep breath, and continued. I didn't sell those lands. They were taken from me. Ricardo Salazar isn't a successful businessman. He's a thief in an expensive suit. And if there's any justice in this world, someday someone will make him pay. I don't ask for revenge. I only ask for the truth. That my name be cleared, that my grandchildren know their grandfather wasn't a fraud, that he was an honest man. I forgive Ricardo Salazar, because forgiveness is all I have left. But may God not forgive him. With love and hope for the future, Aurelio Mendez Solis. Don Esteban finished reading and lowered the letter. Silence filled the room like river water. No one coughed, no one moved, no one breathed. Judge Quintana took off her glasses and wiped her eyes. The defense wishes to respond. The young lawyer stood up, opened his mouth, but before he could speak, Ricardo Salazar yanked him by the arm. Sit down, Mr. Salazar. I need you to... Sit down. Ricardo looked at his lawyer with dead eyes. There's nothing to say. The lawyer sat down, confused and defeated. The judge nodded. Very well. She looked at Don Esteban. The letter is admitted as evidence. She banged her gavel. The next hearing will be Monday at 10 a.m. We will hear the testimony of Judge Ramirez Ochoa. A pause. You may adjourn. Outside the courthouse, reporters swarmed Lucia like bees. Miss Mendez Solis, how do you feel? What do you think of Ricardo Salazar's reaction? Do you believe you will win the case? Lucia raised her hand. The reporters fell silent. My grandfather, Aurelio Mendez Solis, was an honest man who worked his entire life to build something worthy. They stole everything from him, humiliated him, destroyed him. She paused. But today, 40 years later, his voice was heard, and that brings a smile. That is justice. Do you have anything to say to Ricardo Salazar? Clears throat. Lucia looked towards the courthouse entrance. Ricardo was exiting, escorted by police. He walked with his head down. He was no longer the arrogant man who laughed at the employees. He was just an old, scared man. I have nothing to say to him. Lucia turned to the cameras. My grandfather has already said everything that needed to be said. She walked away with Don Esteban. The reporters continued shouting questions, but Lucia no longer heard them. She just walked, step by step, towards the future her grandfather never got to see. That night, in a pretrial detention cell, Ricardo Salazar sat on the metal cot. He held the letter in his hands, a copy his lawyer had given him. He read it once, twice, 10 times. And for the first time in his life, Ricardo Salazar cried, not from remorse, but from rage. Rage because he had lost. Rage because a dead man had destroyed him from the grave. Rage because he knew the worst was yet to come. Monday would arrive, and with it, Judge Ramirez, the man who knew everything, the man who could bury him forever. Monday, 10 a.m. The courthouse was even more crowded than the previous week. They had to set up an adjacent room with live transmission for people who couldn't fit. Lucia arrived early. She wore the same black suit, the same hairstyle. But today she carried something else. Her grandfather's pocket watch in the inner pocket of her jacket. Stopped at 3:17, a reminder of why she was there. Don Esteban was waiting for her at the entrance. Ready? Ready. They entered together. Ricardo Salazar was already seated at his table. Today he had 5 lawyers. They had brought reinforcements, all in expensive suits, leather briefcases, and that predatory look that smells blood. Judge Quintana entered and banged her gavel. We begin. She looked at Don Esteban. The plaintiff's side may present its first witness. Don Esteban stood up. We call to the stand Mr. Hector Ramirez Ochoa, retired judge. A murmur ran through the room. The doors opened, and an old man entered, 86 years old. He walked with a cane, his back stooped, sparse white hair, hands trembling with Parkinson's, but his eyes were clear, alert, alive. He walked slowly to the stand and sat down. The clerk handed him a glass of water. Judge Quintana leaned towards him. Mr. Ramirez, do you understand you are under oath? Yes, Your Honor. And that anything you say can be used against you? I understand. The old judge looked towards Ricardo Salazar. And I am willing to accept the consequences. Don Esteban approached the stand. Mr. Ramirez, you were a civil judge in Naucalpan from 1970 to 1995. Is that correct? Correct. Do you recall the Aurelio Mendez Solis case in 1983? I remember it perfectly. Can you tell us what happened? The old judge closed his eyes, took a deep breath, and spoke. In June of 1983, Ricardo Salazar, the father of the accused, came to my office. He offered me 500,000 pesos if I declared Mendez Solis's deeds to be false. He opened his eyes. I told him no. And what happened? The next day, 2 men visited me. They told me they knew where my daughter studied. They showed me photographs of her leaving university. His voice broke. They told me accidents happen, that it would be a shame if something happened to her. Lucia felt a chill. And then I agreed. Judge Ramirez looked at his hands. I summoned Aurelio Mendez Solis to my office. I showed him forged documents Salazar had prepared. I told him his deeds were invalid, that if he didn't sign the lands over to Salazar, he would go to jail. A tear fell onto his wrinkled hands. Aurelio looked me in the eyes and said, Judge Ramirez, you know this is wrong. And I told him to sign because I was a coward. The silence was like lead. Did you receive the money? Yes. 500,000 pesos. I used it to send my daughter to study abroad, where Salazar couldn't touch her. He looked up at Judge Quintana. I have lived with that guilt for 40 years, and when I read about this case in the newspaper, I knew I had to do something, even if it's late, even if it's no longer useful. Don Esteban nodded. You are not late, Mr. Ramirez. You arrived exactly when you needed to. He turned to the judge. No further questions. One of Ricardo's lawyers sprang to his feet. Your Honor, this testimony is clearly the product of a faulty memory. Mr. Ramirez is 86 years old. He could be confused. I am not confused. The old judge banged his cane on the floor. I am old. I am sick, but I am not crazy, and I will not die without telling the truth. The judge raised her hand. The testimony is accepted. She looked at the defense attorney. Do you wish to cross-examine the witness? The lawyer looked at Ricardo. Ricardo shook his head. No, Your Honor. Judge Ramirez stepped down from the stand. He walked slowly towards the exit, but before leaving, he stopped in front of Lucia. Your grandfather was a good man. He placed a trembling hand on her shoulder, and you are worthy of him. Lucia couldn't speak. She just nodded. The judge left. Don Esteban called the second witness. Ismael Fuentes, former employee of Salazar Corporation. A nervous, sweating 50-year-old man took the stand. Mr. Fuentes, you worked as the personal driver for Ricardo Salazar Sr. from 1980 to 1990. Is that correct? Yes. What can you tell us about the Mendez Solis case? The man swallowed. I drove Mr. Salazar to Aurelio Mendez's house several times. Sometimes at night, I heard threats, I heard shouting. He looked towards Ricardo Jr. Once, I heard Mr. Salazar tell his son, "This is how you do business in Mexico. People like Mendez are weak, and you have to crush them before they rise." Ricardo Jr. closed his eyes. "Why didn't you speak up sooner?" "Because I was afraid. Because I needed the job. Because—" He lowered his voice. "Because I was paid to keep quiet. 50,000 pesos when I resigned, on the condition that I never spoke." "And why are you speaking now?" "Because I have cancer." He pointed to his chest. "The doctors give me 6 months, and I don't want to die knowing I kept silent while an innocent man lost everything." Another silence, heavier than the last. Don Esteban presented 3 more witnesses. Each one told a piece of the puzzle. Threats, bribes, forged documents, bought witnesses. Ricardo Salazar sank further and further into his chair. His lawyers could barely defend themselves, objecting, protesting, but it was like trying to stop an avalanche with their hands. At 3 p.m., Judge Quintana called a 15-minute recess. Lucia went out into the hallway. She needed air. Doña Carmen was waiting for her outside. She had come to hear Judge Ramirez's testimony. "How do you feel, my daughter?" "Tired, but okay." "Clears throat?" "Your grandfather would be proud." Lucia smiled, took out the pocket watch and looked at it. 3:17, the time when everything stopped for Aurelio Mendez Solis, but also the time when everything began anew for his family. "We're going to win, Grandma." "I know." They returned to the courtroom, but as Lucia entered, she saw something strange. Ricardo Salazar was not at his table. His lawyers were whispering nervously. Judge Quintana entered and banged her gavel. "Where is the accused?" One of the lawyers stood up. "Your Honor, Mr. Salazar requested a moment in private. He is in the restroom. You have 2 minutes, or I will continue without him." 1 minute passed. 2 minutes. 3. The judge frowned. "Clerk, go find him." The clerk left. He returned 30 seconds later, his face pale. "Your Honor, Mr. Salazar is not in the restroom." "What do you mean?" "He's not there. We found the window open." The clerk swallowed. "We believe he fled." A murmur erupted in the room. The judge banged her gavel 3 times. "Order! Order!" She looked at the clerk. "Call security. Issue an immediate arrest warrant. No one leaves this building until he is found." An alarm sounded. Police officers ran through the hallways, but Lucia knew the truth. Ricardo Salazar had fled like the coward he always was. They found him 2 hours later attempting to board a private flight to Brazil at Toluca Airport. He was arrested in front of the cameras, cuffed, dragged back, and when he arrived at the courthouse, Judge Quintana looked at him with absolute contempt. "Mr. Salazar, attempted escape aggravates your situation." She banged her gavel. "You are found guilty of desertion. Sentencing will be read on Wednesday at 10 a.m. She looked at the police officers. "Take him away." Ricardo was dragged out of the room. He no longer shouted, no longer protested. He just stared at the floor. Defeated, destroyed, finished. Wednesday, 10 a.m. The courthouse was silent. It wasn't the nervous silence of before. It was a silence of waiting, of anticipation, like when the sky darkens before a storm. Lucia sat in her usual spot. Black suit, hair pulled back, her grandfather's pocket watch in the inner pocket. Beside her sat Doña Carmen. For the first time, the elderly woman had entered the courtroom. He wanted to see with his own eyes the fall of the empire that had destroyed his husband. Don Esteban reviewed his papers one last time, but it wasn't necessary. They had already won. Now all that remained was to hear the official words. Across the room, Ricardo Salazar sat between 4 police officers. He no longer had lawyers by his side. 3 of the 5 had resigned after the escape attempt. The other 2 simply hadn't shown up. Ricardo wore the same gray suit as always, but now it hung loosely on him. He had lost weight, his face gaunt, dark circles deep beneath his eyes, his beard unkempt. He no longer looked like a magnate. He looked like what he had always been, an ordinary man who had lived off the plunder of another. Judge Quintana entered. Everyone stood. She sat, then banged her gavel. Once, the sound echoed like a bell. "You may be seated." Silence returned. The judge put on her reading glasses, picked up a multi-page document, and held it with both hands. In the case of Mendez Solis versus Salazar Corporation, After reviewing all the evidence presented, hearing the testimonies, and analyzing the historical documents, she paused. This court reaches the following conclusions. Lucia felt Doña Carmen's hand tighten around hers. First, it is proven, beyond a doubt, that the lands located in Naucalpan, state of Mexico, were legitimately acquired by Mr. Aurelio Mendez Solis in 1960. The original deeds presented are authentic and valid. Ricardo closed his eyes. Second, it is proven that Ricardo Salazar Sr. used threats, judicial bribery, and forged documents to force Mr. Mendez Solis to sign over said lands to him in 1983. This act constitutes aggravated dispossession, real estate fraud, and bribery of a public official. A murmur swept through the room. Third, it is proven that Ricardo Salazar Shore, the accused present, was aware of these facts and benefited financially from them. Furthermore, he attempted to obstruct justice through witness intimidation, attempted bribery, and escape during the judicial process. Ricardo opened his eyes, looking at the judge. The arrogance was gone, replaced by resignation. Therefore, this court declares Ricardo Salazar Jr. guilty of the following charges: concealment of fraud, obstruction of justice, witness intimidation, and procedural desertion. The judge paused, took a sip of water, and continued. The sentence is as follows. 1. Mr. Ricardo Salazar Jr. shall transfer 60% of the lands in Naucalpan to Lucia Gabriela Mendez Solis de Villarreal, the legitimate heir of Aurelio Mendez Solis. The remaining 40% will be sold at public auction, and the funds will be allocated to compensation for other families affected by Salazar Corporation's fraudulent practices. Lucia felt her heart explode in her chest. 2. Mr. Salazar shall pay an indemnity of 450 million pesos to Miss Mendez Solis for moral damages, loss of profit, and suffering caused to her family over 40 years. Doña Carmen brought her hands to her mouth. 3. Mr. Salazar is disqualified from holding executive, directorial, or legal representative positions in any company in Mexican territory for a period of 15 years. Ricardo lowered his head. 4. He shall serve a prison sentence of 2 years for obstruction of justice and procedural desertion, without the right to parole. The judge lowered the document and looked Ricardo directly in the eyes. Mr. Salazar, money can buy many things. It can buy lawyers, witnesses, even corrupt judges. But there is one thing money can never buy: dignity. She paused. Your father stole Aurelio Mendez Solis's dignity, and you tried to steal his granddaughter's dignity. But today, justice restores what was stolen. She banged her gavel. May God have mercy on your soul, because this court does not. She banged her gavel 3 times. Case closed. The room erupted. Reporters rushed toward the doors. Cameras flashed. People applauded. Lucia didn't move. She just closed her eyes. She took a deep breath and felt something she hadn't felt in years. Peace. Doña Carmen hugged her. She was crying, but this time they were not tears of pain, but tears of relief. You did it, my daughter. You did it. We did it, Grandma. Both of us. Lucia held her tighter. You, me, and Grandpa. Don Esteban approached, his eyes red. He was smiling. 40 years waiting for this moment. He extended his hand. Thank you for not giving up. Lucia clasped his hand. Thank you for believing. They left the courthouse together. Outside, dozens of reporters awaited them. Lucia, how do you feel? What are you going to do with the money? Do you have anything to say about Ricardo Salazar? Lucia stopped in front of the cameras, took a deep breath. Today, justice was served, not revenge. Justice. She looked directly into the lens. My grandfather, Aurelio Mendez Solis, was an honest man who worked his entire life to build something dignified. They stole everything from him, humiliated him, killed him with sadness. She paused. But today, 40 years later, his name has been cleared, and that is all that matters. I forgive Ricardo Salazar. Lucia thought of her grandfather's letter. I forgive Ricardo Salazar, because forgiveness is all I have left. My grandfather forgave him. I don't need to. Justice has spoken. She walked away with Doña Carmen and Don Esteban. The reporters continued to shout, but Lucia no longer heard them. She was only walking toward the future. In pre-trial detention, Ricardo Salazar was signing papers, land transfers, payment orders, asset liquidation. His accountant sat opposite him, a 60-year-old man who had worked for the Salazar family for 30 years. Mr. Salazar, after paying the indemnity and settling debts, You have approximately 80 million pesos left. Ricardo looked up. 80 million? I had over 2,000. You had, sir, in the past. The accountant closed his portfolio. Investors withdrew their funds. Banks foreclosed on collateral. Partners sued. He stood up. 80 million is what remains, and with that, you must live the next 2 years in prison, and the following 13 years unable to work. Ricardo clenched his fists. This isn't over. I'm going to appeal. I'm going to... You won't do anything. The accountant looked at him with something akin to pity. Mr. Salazar, you lost. Accept it. He left the room. Ricardo remained alone. He looked at the gray prison walls. He heard the shouts of other inmates in the distance, and, for the first time in his life, understood what his father had never wanted to tell him, that everything they had built was founded on sand, and when the tide rises, the sand disappears, and with it, everything else. 3 months later, the house in Colonia Guerrero no longer smelled of dampness and sad memories. It now smelled of fresh paint, new wood, and freshly brewed coffee. Lucia had used part of the indemnity money to buy the entire apartment in the building, not to live alone, but so Doña Carmen would have space, so there would be light, so the walls wouldn't have cracks that let in the cold. The living room had new furniture, nothing luxurious, just dignified. A comfortable beige sofa, a solid wood table, white curtains that let in the sun, and on the main wall, framed in glass and walnut wood, was Aurelio Mendez Solis's letter, the letter that had destroyed an empire, the letter that had restored a name. Doña Carmen sat in her new wicker chair by the window. She was knitting a blue scarf. Her hands no longer trembled as much. The doctor said her arthritis improved when the stress disappeared. Lucia was making coffee in the kitchen. The kitchen now had a new stove, a new refrigerator, clean tiles. Do you want sweetbread, Grandma? Oh, yes, my daughter. From that new bakery, the chocolate ones. Lucia smiled, put 3 chocolate conchas on a plate, poured 2 cups of coffee, and sat down next to her grandmother. Outside, Colonia Guerrero remained Colonia Guerrero, bustling, chaotic, full of life. But now, when Lucia went out on the street, people greeted her. The lady at the corner store gave her fruit. The man at the taco stand didn't charge her. You're Mr. Mendez's granddaughter, right? The one who won the lawsuit. What an honor, miss. What an honor, miss. It was strange to be recognized, to be respected. Lucia was still getting used to it. Mija, have you decided what you're going to do with the lands? Doña Carmen asked, biting into her bread. Lucia sipped her coffee slowly. She thought about the question everyone asked her. The reporters, the lawyers, the investors who called every day with million-dollar offers. Are you going to sell? Are you going to build? Are you going to partner with someone? But Lucia had already decided 2 weeks ago. Actually, she said calmly, I'm going to do what Grandpa wanted to do. Doña Carmen stopped chewing. She looked at her with wide eyes. Really? Really? Lucia smiled. I'm not going to build luxury towers or shopping malls. I'm going to build houses, beautiful houses, with gardens, with space for children, at prices that normal people can afford. She paused, as Grandpa always wanted. Doña Carmen put her bread down on the plate, wiped her hands, stood up slowly, walked over to Lucia, and hugged her. Oh, my daughter, oh, my child, your grandfather would be so proud. Lucia closed her eyes, breathing in the scent of cinnamon and soap from her grandmother. I know. They stayed like that for a long time, until there was a knock at the door. Lucia pulled away and went to open it. On the other side was Doña Remedios, the neighbor from 3B. 78 years old, short, round, with jet black dyed hair and bright red lipstick. The nosiest neighbor in the entire building. Oh, Lucia, forgive me for bothering you, but I can't stand the curiosity. Doña Remedios fanned herself with her hand. Is it true you were given 450 million pesos? Lucia smiled. Good morning, Doña Remedios. Would you like to come in? Oh, no, I don't want to bother you. I just wanted, well, you know, one hears things. She leaned in as if to share a secret. They say you're now richer than the owner of the tortilleria, and that man has 3 trucks. Lucia bit her lip to keep from laughing. Doña Remedios, do you remember when you told me I would never amount to anything, that girls like me were only good for cleaning other people's houses? Doña Remedios turned as red as a tomato. Oh no, I never said that. When did I ever say that? I always knew you were from a good family. You could tell from a young age. I told my godmother, that girl is going to go far, right, Carmen? Doña Carmen shouted from inside. Liar! Lucia burst out laughing. Don't worry, Doña Remedios. I don't hold grudges, she smiled. But next time you want to gossip about me, at least tell the truth. She closed the door slowly. Doña Remedios was left outside, sputtering. Lucia returned to her grandmother. Both of them were laughing. That woman is incorrigible, Doña Carmen said, wiping tears of laughter from her eyes. Absolutely. But she's harmless. They sat down again, finished their coffee, ate their sweet bread, and for a moment everything was perfect, until Lucia remembered something. Grandma, I have to tell you something. What happened? Lucia took an envelope from her purse and placed it on the table. I received this yesterday, from the prison. Doña Carmen frowned. From Ricardo Salazar? Yes. What does he want? I don't know. I haven't opened it. They both looked at the white envelope, unaddressed, with only the pre-trial detention center's address in the upper left corner. Are you going to open it? Doña Carmen asked. Lucia thought about it, picked up the envelope, and opened it. Inside was a handwritten letter, the handwriting shaky. She began to read aloud. Lucia, I don't expect you to read this. I don't expect you to forgive me. I expect nothing. I just want to tell you that you were right. My father built this empire on lies, and I sustained it with more lies. I convinced myself that it was okay, that this was how business was done, that your grandfather was weak and I was strong. But now, sitting in this cell, I realize something. I was the weak one. I always was, because it takes far more strength to be honest than to be rich. And your grandfather had that strength. I never did. I don't ask for your forgiveness. I don't deserve it. I only ask that you do something for me. When you build on that land, put up a plaque that says, in memory of Aurelio Mendez Solis, an honest man in a dishonest world, so that people know, so that people remember, so that even if I am forgotten, he won't be. Ricardo Salazar. Lucia finished reading, folded the letter, and put it back in the envelope. Doña Carmen watched her with questioning eyes. What are you going to do? Lucia thought for a moment. Then she smiled. I'm going to put up the plaque, not because he asked me to, but because Grandpa deserves it. Doña Carmen nodded. That's the right thing to do. Lucia put the letter in a drawer. She closed the drawer, and with it, she closed that chapter of her life. She was no longer the humiliated employee, no longer the granddaughter of the man who was robbed. She was Lucia Gabriela Mendez Solis de Villarreal, heiress, businesswoman, builder of dreams, and she had work to do. 2 weeks later, Lucia stood before the lands of Naucalpan, 340 empty hectares waiting. Beside her were Don Esteban, a young architect named Javier, and a civil engineer who had worked with her grandfather in the 60s. How many houses can we build? Lucia asked. The engineer reviewed the plans. With this land, about 200 families, 2-story houses, 3 bedrooms, front and back gardens. At what price can we sell them? The architect did quick calculations. If we use good quality materials, but not luxury, and if you sell with a fair margin, we could offer each house at 2 million pesos with accessible credit. Lucia smiled. Perfect. Start the paperwork. I want the first house ready in 6 months. 6 months? The architect scratched his head. That's very little time. Then work fast. Lucia patted him on the shoulder. My grandfather waited 40 years. I won't make families wait a single day longer than necessary. The men nodded and got to work. 6 months later, the first house was ready. It wasn't a palace. It had no marble or gold, but it had large windows that let in the sun. It had solid walls. It had a garden where children could play. And it had something more important: dignity. Lucia stood in front of the house with Doña Carmen, Don Esteban, and a family of 4, mother, father, and 2 6-year-old twin girls. The mother was crying, the father couldn't speak. The girls ran through the garden, shouting with happiness. It's ours, whispered the mother. It's really ours. It's really yours. Lucia handed her the keys, and no one would ever take it away from her. The family entered the house. The girls ran upstairs. Their cries of joy filled the air. Doña Carmen wiped her tears with a handkerchief. Your grandfather would be so proud, my daughter. I know. Don Esteban pointed to the front of the house. There, by the door, was a bronze plaque. Lucia walked over and read it aloud. Project Aurelio Mendez Solis, Dignified Homes for Working Families, in memory of an honest man in a dishonest world. She touched the plaque with her fingers, feeling the cold metal under her hand. "Hello, Grandpa," she whispered. "I did it. We did it." The wind blew, the leaves on the trees rustled, and for a moment, Lucia felt as if someone had placed a hand on her shoulder. That afternoon, Lucia received a call. "Miss Mendez Solis, this is the civil registry. We have the documents ready." "Perfect. I'll come pick them up tomorrow." She hung up. Doña Carmen looked at her from the sofa. "What documents?" Lucia smiled. "I'm registering a foundation. It's going to be called the Carmen Mendez Foundation." Doña Carmen's jaw dropped. "What? What you heard?" Lucia sat down next to her. "I'm going to use some of the money to create scholarships. Scholarships for young people from working families who want to study. University, masters, whatever." She took her grandmother's hand. "So they have the opportunities we didn't have." Doña Carmen couldn't speak. She just hugged Lucia tightly. They both cried, but this time, they weren't tears of pain. They were tears of hope. 3 months later, the Carmen Mendez Foundation opened its doors. 50 scholarships in the first year for studying engineering, medicine, law, administration. Among the scholarship recipients was a 19-year-old girl. Her name was Rosa. She worked cleaning offices at night to pay for school. When she was told she had won the scholarship, she burst into tears. "I'm really going to be able to study medicine." "You will," said Lucia with a smile. "And when you finish, you'll help people who need it, just as you needed it." Rosa hugged her tightly, almost desperately. "I won't disappoint you, I promise." "I know," Lucia patted her on the back. "Because people like us don't give up." Rosa floated away with the acceptance letter in her hand, with the future shining in her eyes. Lucia watched her go, and knew she was doing the right thing. A year after the trial, Lucia went to the civil pantheon of Dolores. It was Sunday. The sky was clear. The sun shone softly on the marble and concrete tombs. She walked through the silent aisles until she reached a humble grave, unadorned, just a simple gray granite headstone. Aurelio Mendez Solis, 1919 to 1993. Honest man, loving father, never forgotten. Doña Carmen was already there. She had arrived early. She carried white flowers in her hands. Lucia knelt beside her. She placed a hand on the headstone. "Hello, Grandpa." Doña Carmen smiled. "Tell him everything, my daughter. Tell him what you did." Lucia closed her eyes and breathed deeply. "Grandpa, I recovered the land. I won the lawsuit. Ricardo Salazar is in jail, and your name has been cleared." She paused. "But that's not what's important. What's important is what comes next." She opened her eyes and looked at the tomb. "I built the houses you wanted to build. 50 families already have a home, and there will be 200 by next year." She smiled. "I also opened a foundation in Grandma's name. 50 young people are studying thanks to you. Because without your sacrifice, without your honesty, none of this would be possible." Doña Carmen placed the flowers on the tomb. "And most importantly, Aurelio," the old woman touched the headstone tenderly, "your granddaughter is happy, she is free, and she carries your name with pride." Lucia felt a lump in her throat. "Thank you, Grandpa, for teaching